Right, so we saw the difference between the Eved Poshut and the Eved Naaman in Kama in several details and several Oifanim. And we saw that the union of the Eved Naaman, even though he has the Mila that he improves and brings Shevach into the properties and the ownership of the master of the Odain. Nonetheless, that's done al-Yidei. People, we saw that that's done in Inyonim which are outside the Odain himself. And therefore it's done in things which are what we describe with the expression min hamuchan, kilo, in other properties, in another inyonim, and through his ability to make what you might call business deals, inyonim ke'ela, then he brings the profit and the improvement and the aliyah in the properties and the general ownership of the Odom. But we saw that's all through connection and through combination of other koiches and other ownerships outside that of the Odom. And therefore, it's not a thing which is done b'yagiyas kapok. It's not that he works hard with his hands or physically, but it's an intellectual and what you might call elevated form of improvement of the whole state of the Odin's ownership in his household. And Mamela we saw ein b'zeh tainu kokach. It's not a union of tainu gamiti by the Odin, even though for sure he's very pleased and satisfied with the improvement in his general household. But it's not a union from tainu gamiti as if he would have done it himself, as if the Odin himself would have been involved in these inyonim. Well, they come, as we saw in even from min hamuchan, hadova. It can be compared to somebody finding something already prepared and ready, even though that's a thing to his credit, it's going to improve his situation. But since he himself wasn't personally involved with Dora, and it wasn't a union of effort on his part, that even though he's tremendously pleased and has nachas from the fact that these things are added into his general richness and his general well-being of Vibalda, that didn't come through his personal interference or personal intervention. Therefore, Amos said tainu kokach. We saw right down at the end of Shin Samachal. Ukemesha meitzed from Muchan Hadora. Ukemesha is burli yil diba maschel hanal in Achreya vayal kechem teilechu. And then we saw in the brackets of Kemeikein Eitzah Eved, the same thing is not only by the benefactor or the beneficiary of the efforts made by the Eved, but that's the Odain, but also in the Eved himself, he who produces the profit for the Odain. As who gamkein min hamuchan, it's not something that he produces mamish, as we just saw b'yagiyas kapo, through the effort of his own hands. No, he finds these inyonim already mi'amuchan b'mekayim isacherim, and in other inyonim apart from his own effort. Just that he knows how to improve them, to invest them, to find ways of improving the master's household. So we saw that Eitzel Eved hu gamkein min hamuchan. Shahari ein ze mikoach atzmi mamish, ki im mitzad ilui ha'odei, mishum ze nishkasher elo. Achamishon is boya diba maschel ela hadvorim. But it's one of the drushim prior to that drush Achreya vayal kechem teilechu. So in the brachas the Rebbe puts in a slightly deeper, what you might call dimension, in that whole understanding. It's not just that the Eved Naaman doesn't work by a Giyas Kapov, which things which are his own effort and his own product. Even though that may be on a relatively simple level, but it's not his own product, because he deals with higher inyanim in improving the household, general ownership of the Odain. I suppose nowadays you would say that he works on the Wall Street and on the internet and chesed and all these type of inyanim. But that doesn't mean that it's a good thing to look on the internet. On the contrary, that means that Bochum, what their whole inyan is only to be mishtadled b'Torah and to learn Torah, and to be Yisik and Avedus Hashem kol hayom v'kol halayla. They don't have anything to do with the internet. It's not only that. It's not only that the Eved Naaman he deals with inyanim which are got interference from other forces and other people and other inyanim, and mamela he deals with things which are outside his own effort, etc., etc. So the Rebbe puts in details that there's another bracket in the brackets. There's another nakuda that the Eved Naaman works kilo ibedvarim that are min hamuchad. They're not really his effort and his product. The whole reason why he's connected with the Odain Melachatchila, and the whole reason why he became Eved to the Odain, is that's not something that he gave away himself to the Odain. In other words, that he doesn't really know any miles of anything. No, he's just like a purchased article to the Odain, giving himself away completely and entirely. And that's an act of koach hatzmei on the part of the person. He takes himself and gives himself away entirely. But the Eved Naaman is bound up to the Odain, mitzad the ilui of the Odain. In other words, he understood melachatchila that this is a great master, or a very worthy master to have to do it. And that's why he became melachatchila makusha at the beginning. So it follows that really his whole effort from the what you might call the very opening point of his kashrus to the Odain is from a dova hamuchan. In other words, because the Odain was already a worthy and elevated individual before he appeared on the scene, and he's makusha mitzad that ilui that there is in the Odain, then it's not really b'koach hatzmei. He's been drawn by a higher and elevated inyan. If you're a person that has a chush in elevated inyanim, then you're born by an elevated. You're drawn and you become bound up and makusha to something which is elevated. It's almost like a process that is there, mitzad teva hadvarim, as you might say. And therefore, the Rebbe said it's like something that you come to a prophet which is already prepared for you by some other power. It's not that you gave yourself away entirely, and you, by the work of your own being, your own hands, as you might call it, that you brought yourself to this kashrus. It was an expected inyan, because the Eved Naaman is an elevated man. He's a person with elevated chushim, and therefore he was drawn to the ilui, to the greatness of the Odain. The mishum seh nishkasher. It was really for that whole reason that he became a kusher to the Odain. So therefore his whole kashrus is like a dover min hamuchan. It's already something that was there and ready, and being as he's a person with a sensitivity to those in Yonim, he was drawn to it. And therefore his whole kesher to the Odain is a thing that's got a certain, what you might call, prepared and ready story that made it true, made it happen that way. Over the Eved Aposhut, he's a mensch who doesn't understand in high inyanim, and his inyan is even heipach mi inyanim ha'ila. If he takes himself and devotes himself to the Odain, then it's not mitzad any maila. No, that's purely because he gave himself away. B'kol etzem inyanim, b'kol mahusay. So whatever he does, it's not because he appreciates, and not because he really wants the greatness of the Odain. He's just devoted be'etzem to the greatness of the to the worthy prophet of the Odain. And therefore, when he does it, it's kilo in an even overseas the atme, what we called earlier, Yagiyas Kapo. It's like the struggle of his own of his own hands and his own efforts, and therefore the Gabi the Odin, it's even deeper than that. The Odin sees his efforts as if it were his effort. In other words, he becomes like, as we saw, an Eiver of the Odin. He becomes like a limb. Shadewa ukamoshu ubanimsho lamaila. That's all how it is lamata here in the moshel. If we take the two types of avodim, the Gabi the Odin. But if we take it lamaila in Elakus, ubanimsho lamaila, muvan she'eno mamshik b'zeh b'chinas mitzvah yisoi, b'chinas ha-mitzvah she'ba'atzmus mami. And it's moving that the Eved Ne'eman, despite his high chush, his high knowledge and his high appreciation of high inyanim b'negeh to the Eibishter, then he's not really mamshik the inyan of the mitzvahs that are klulim in the atzmus mamish. He's mamshik the inyan of what we saw before, mitzvahs havaya, the inyan of the mitzvahs that they already got a shot to high inyanim, to the sfiras and to kavones. Therefore, we might say, by even kloli, that the difference between the two inyanim is what is mavur, habid drushim, and considers the difference between kavonas hamitzvahs and kiyum hamitzvahs, b'peil mamish b'kabbalah ser. In other words, it's mavur in the famous hemshich of Samach Tov Rishon Zayin. There, the Rebbe the Machabit, the Rebbe Rachab, is mavaya ba'arichas, the difference between the two eifani in kiyum hamitzvahs. It is what's called kiyum hamitzvahs, b'peil mamish, b'pshita, of Kabbalah Ser, only for the fact that he was nitztave, he was commanded to keep the mitzvahs. That's why he does it purely mitzvah the rotzen of the mitzvah, and therefore the whole kiyum is Kabbalah Ser, Malchus Shamayim. And then there's another form of kiyum mitzvah where when you do the mitzvah, you're mechaven in that mitzvah to all sorts of errors, elyonim, to avshachas misayomis which occur on the day that mitzvah, etc. So we see that it's like a dover hipukli. On the one hand, that appears to be a much higher Indian, a much more elevated Indian with a more sensitivity to Elikus and to Ruchni as how it is by Elam Asalyenim. And the answer is Henachana, Emaskach. Oh, Mitzad Hasheni, that's not the Indian of giving herself away absolutely and entirely only because you were commanded. No, you would have done that Mitzad your Gishmach B'dover Hazeh, Afilu. That there's been the commandment given by the Eibush that you would be koifet and rots. L'dvar mitzvah mitzvah the mila that there is in the mitzvah, the gishmak, and the idea that you have in the Olam Yisrael Elyonim, which comes to us that the kiyum mitzvah is not mamish purely mitzvah Kabbalah Torah, purely mitzvah the inyan of tzivui ha mitzvah. I think in the other way, Shasayid does a mitzvah for him because then he's completely and utterly given away. He has no place in the mitzvah, only mitzvah shem nitztave. He's been commanded by the mitzvah, and he's been makabel alatzmoi oil mal. Who say that's why he does the mitzvah? Or that we could say that's the two inyanim of these two avodim. But that's the Eved Ne'eman and the Eved Haposhet. And that's what the Rebbe's Maram is here. That the toifus in two different levels. That the Eved Ne'eman, he's toifus ha'inyan in Gilu Elikus, which has already been there, and already been nimshach in a form of Gilu, albeit high inyanim in Gilu. And that's mitzvahs havaya, the mitzvahs themselves have already been nimshach into a level of Gilu Elikus alidei sfiros and inyanim where it's possible to be mechaven lahem. When you do it purely mitzad the inyan with Kabbalah Sel bilvad, then you teifus the inyan how it is mitzad atzmus is borach. What there it's not shart to really be mechaven to the pratim in the mitzvah because we don't really know what was the emes kavanah. What is the Eibush to give out the mit? We only know that he wanted that we should do it. That should be the inyan b'peil, and therefore it's the Eibush's mitzvah. It's not you having any part in the mitzvah. The far eyes is mitzvah. So and that's what the inyan from the mitzvah sarayah mitzadat. So said the Rebbe, move on that Eved Ne'eman, he doesn't reach that madrega, despite the fact that he reaches a lot of high inyanim, alidei kavonas hamitzvahs, but he doesn't reach that inyan. Hagam shemamshik gam ken gilu eirus nailim yoyid. He's mamshik very high inyanim, and in an eivim chinas toisefus bracha. In other words, in the nimshul he brings as we saw in the Moshel Lamata, he brings blessing into the household of the other. So similarly, Lamaila, he causes what's called Toisefes Gilui Oirois in Atzila. As well now, that the Ikakiyam are those mitzvahs which are Kavonas of, and the Kiyum mitzvah the Kavonas, Beika the Gilas and Atzilas, and in Oilam Selyoinim, it's only Liyasid that there'll be the Gilu of that. So he also brings a different taste of his Brachim. We call Mokim Hakur Hu Beklal B'chinas Mitzvahs Havaya. It's all in the level, and that what you might call Madriga and department, you might say, which is the Indian for Mitzvahs Havaya. Shahein B'ha'oiris HaShayochim Lishtauslim. Ultimately speaking, that's got a shaykhs to Ishtauslim. If it can be measured in different oiris, Amislabshim in the Kalim of Atzilas, and it can be Mishachis, the Sphira Zur, the Indian Zur, or the Hamshocha Mesuyemes, then it must be oil that's got a shaykhs to Sochel to Hamshocha Vagiloi in the Oilamas, and that's the Indian of shaykhs to Ishtauslim. Remember, it's a door of Yipuchoi, Tafki the elevated mention. The mention he's got a kush in Elakus. And in Sphiris Oelien in Bukhulu, as he alidei kiyum mitzvahs of his own mamshich ha'in for ha'in seifut shak to Giloi. So was it the Eitzah? Somebody should ask the Shamit of him came, why did he need to be an Eved Ne'eman B'chlav, so there won't be any Avodim Ne'em on him. We'll just turn everybody into Avodim Peshutim. Was it the matter of knowing all these things, if so? If you do the mitzvahs that way, you don't. So the answer is you got to be both. You have to know what the Eved Ne'eman knows of a Bishash. You actually keep the mitzvah, you got to do it. But Mamish B'Kabbalah Se'o Ma'avav Shamayim. And that's the whole meaning from Tonchei T'mimim. The Tonchei T'mimim, Kemavur in Ayin Beis, there's a whole piece in the Ayin Beis with Rebbe Mavaya, that the emes of pshitas of an Eved Poshet can only be alidei what you know, what all these things that the Eved Ne'eman knows. If you know all of the, and then you put that all away at the actual rega at the kiyum mitzvah, and you do it by Kabbalah Seir, then there's another chayas in that Kabbalah Seir. It's another type of bren in the Kabbalah Seir, because otherwise Kabbalah Seir can have a certain what you might call dryness of a certain how they call it, lack of bren, because it's only Kabbalah Seir. And therefore, there's Kabbalah Seir, which is full with the union of the Yediyah and the Devekis of the Eved Ne'eman. And Nimta, Emes Atomim is a or he's a combination of the Eved Ne'eman with the Eved Poshet, and he's a Ishabas of the two together. But we'll see maybe as we go along, if Hashem will be Mizachah to learn further here in the Emshech. We'll see further Benagir Inyonim Eilu. Our he said, Eved Aposhut, Shehu Bipinas Hanoches Atzmusei Lagamrei Mikol Vakoil. He said, over the Eved Poshut, what he's Indian is the putting aside of himself. Lagamrei Hanoches Atzmusei Lagamrei. He puts his own self completely aside. He doesn't want anything for himself. He doesn't want anything to do with the union of Gileoidas and all this, because he doesn't below he feel that he's got any place there. His whole union is only to do what is the necessity of the other. And I mean, that's a famous expression which occurs in the Friedrich Rabbeim. You can't say it doesn't. It does occur here and there. But this is what is very, very common in the words of the Rebbe Rashab. Well, that's his whole inyan, his whole message to the world and to the Talmidim is the inyan from Hanoches Atzmusei, the putting of the self completely the putting of the self aside altogether. It's a well known, the famous remark of the Friedrich Rebbe, what somebody asked him, what is Atomim? What do you mean you talk about these people learning in your yeshiva and you call them Tmimim? What is a Tomim? So the Rebbe Rayat said a Tomim is Hanoches Atzmusei. He's someone that he puts his whole self completely aside. In other words, when he does in Yonim in Yiddishkeit, he does it man it mitzvot. That's that you're required to do it mitzad the rotzen of the Eibishter Bilvad. And therefore he gives himself away mikoil v'koil. Now what does it mean mikoil v'koil? From everything of everything. Because the Eved Neman also gives himself away, for sure. He's not a selfish being. He's not a person that walks around lighting up a cigar every second moment. The Eved Neman is also a person tremendously involved and tremendously devoted. But it's a difference that he's got a tariz of his own tainung, his own fulfillment, his own gishmak. Masha'ken, the Eved Poshet is mikol v'kol hanoches atzmusay. And the Rebbe says, "V'hu b'koyach atzmei davke v'loi mina muchan." And he said, therefore it follows in a way that it's really like totally ho. It's really dependent one on the other. That you can only do a thing like that if you do it yourself. It's not that something motivates you to do that or something pushes you to do it. That type of devotion, that type of what you might call in Yiddish Übergegebenkeit, that completely overgivenness of the Eved Poshet, that can only come from you, because it's literally what you might call a start from absolute zero. There's no dvarim prepared or no waiting, dangling rewards, how do you call it, awaiting you, but you're starting from a state of absolute giving of the self away, and you're beginning altogether from what you might call the naught of the zero of the bittul of your own self. And says that that's an in which only you can do. I feel the Eibishter doesn't do that for you. That's completely your inyan, and therefore it's called Loi Mina Amuchan. It's not something that you've got a ready purse of the which you're drawing on, or how do you call it, an account that you're drawing on. That you start off completely below dovo. In other words, that you're, as it were, starting off from a profound efes, a profound scratch, and you're giving yourself away entirely to the inyan. So the Rebbe said, now notice that in each of these points we take it from both sides. We take it mitzad the odein, and out is mitzad the eved. And sometimes we put the eved first and then the odein, sometimes the odein and then the eved. But the Nakud is to show how on each madrega there's a parallel, or how do you call it, a corresponding maila mitzad that inyan, how it is mitzad the eved and mitzad the odein. So now the Rebbe says that just like it is in the eved, that's in a complete hanafes hatzmusa, and therefore it's purely his koyach. So he said, "K'moi came beha odain." He said that the way the odain takes that effort on the part of the eved portion, the way he relates to it, is a romina muchan. The odain doesn't see that the eved portion is making him profit or bringing him bracha from things which are already there. But ki'im nechshav ki'agiyas kapor. It's reckoned ki'agiyas kapor. That's reckoned as if the Odin himself were doing it. In other words, it's so bottled is the Eved that the Odin in the Moshel, he sees that kilo, that was his effort, that's his work. And since it starts off from nothing, and it brings in Yonim Mamish kilo from the Bittul Muchlat of the Eved, then the Odin can see that as if he were literally working, like we spoke the other night, the Indian of the boreg, that you just dray the boreg, that the Odin sees the Eved Poshet, but that doesn't belittle the Eved Poshet, but it makes him and the Odin a oneness. It sort of makes between him and the Odin a bitla, the machitza, that there is no one between two koiches or two powers. One l'mayla mia tzoita, is that causes a bitla of the whole machitza. Wherever the Odin sees it, kilo, that was his own effort. And we see that in the Eved it's not min amucha, because he starts off mamish from nowhere and he gives himself away davke b'koyach atzmai. He's not using any other investment, as you might call it, in order to be poil inyans there. And with the Odin it's also the same. The Odin sees that bittul so much on the part of his Eved that it's kilo he himself were doing it. It's kilo a direct Indian, that he and the Eved become like one Indian, biyahad. So the Odin sees that also as not min hamucha. It's like as if he were doing it himself. Without any combination from any other factor. Dover, the word dover here meaning a thing, but meaning the idea of a factor. The Odin sees it as if all this were happening bliko ta'arevas of any other Indian. Not like it was with the Eved Naaman. Like it was with the Eved Naaman, then the Odin already saw in these Inyanim Ki'ilu that there was things that were, it's like a gilu, things that have already become shayach to say this tells us. It's already min hamuchen. Ki'ilu legabi kol ha'inyanim that the Eved is oisik bohem, amamir gam ha'odin. Oisik itoi gam b'inyanim, which are ki'ilu muchanim, besoik say the hishtaushelas, what does it the Inyan, like we saw, or the mitzvahs, how they're tluim in the Shem Havai. Is Harizek and Moshe Adam Ba'atzmei Oise Belishum Harakovas Eidor. This is a pillar. Ubazeh Davke Nimshach Bebchinas Mitzvah Soi Mamish. Davke in that it's possible to be Mamshich Davke through that type of beetle of the Eved Poshet, and the fact that he becomes like Belishum Harakova, he becomes Beli any compository, as you might call it. He becomes one Inyan with the Odin, then that is the Inyan of Mitzvah Soy. If I'm going to come to you, when the Odin does, when the Eved Poshet Lamata does the Mitzvah for Kabbalah Seo, Malchus Shemayim, he's only being Megala, the Eivish to Zah. He doesn't have any benefit from Mizeh. It's not Ke'ilu. Yeah, he's saying, oh, this is beautiful mitzvahs and I'm involved and this is tremendous Indian v'chulu. Well, he does it purely mitzvah. Listen, the Eivish does that. Him and the Eivish are like one hand. It's like Yad Achas. It's possible to call them my mitzvah. Even though, if it weren't for the fact that the Eivish had a mensch lamata, then it wouldn't have been a mitzvah. It becomes a mitzvah alidei the mensch. And yet the Eivish says, no, this is my mitzvah. Yeah, mitzvah soy. Now, mir is a pile plus von Inyan. So now comes on the Rebbe and he says, "V'shoyer shoinenu." In other words, he's going to give us now a brief glimpse how this Inyan is in Elikus Lamaila, how it is in two different levels. The one can be called, as it were, shayach lehamuchan, the tequila already been prepared to be nimshach by there, or it's purely mitzad atzmut. So he said, "V'shoyrusho inyan hu dehine nisbur liyil." In Dibur HaMashkim from Akeir Chayim, that's one of the earlier drushim in Tzamavov. Sheyesh beis madregas ba'er ein seif. In the level of Gilei Lakus Lamayla, there are two main madregas. Now, when we say beis madregas, then we're talking on Klolis Dika level, on general level. Because I said there are many different madregas. I mean, the madregas, rabbis in the Indian from Eretz Yisrael. When we say beis madregas, we mean here two general or Klolis Dika classifications in the Indian of the Gilui Ein Seif, or what you might call lack of Seif. And he says, Ha'alef, Bechinas ha'oyer shehu bechinas hamshocha v'gilui. Now that's very meduic, that expression. The Rebbe said the first one is what we call the bechina, the state or the level of oyer, or that's a bechina v'hamshocha v'gilui. Excuse me, my hello. You got some problem this evening? I'm not feeling well.
I've had a fever since like dinner.
Huh?
I had a fever since dinner. And I thought I could.
Well, if you have a fever, you should go and lay down. You shouldn't force yourself. Well, I can see that you're all sort of.
I'm sorry.
You're all sort of just not able to hold out with what you're doing. So listen, if you have a fever, you mustn't force yourself to. You still have fever?
I think so.
You must lay down. If you have fever, you must lay down, and also you have to drink a lot. You have to drink liquids, and you shouldn't eat heavy food. You should try and drink for let's say, I don't know, half a day or a night at least. Drink a lot, and if you can get aspirin or APC, simple APC takes temperature down. It's very good at taking down temperature. And try not to drink sweet things like drinks or that's only water. Tea, plain tea is very good without sugar. Just plain tea, without biscuits and all that. Just tea is very good, and hopefully your throat off. Do you have a bad throat and everything?
Not really. It's just like my head. I can't think clearly tonight. Face feels
Could be a little bit of overstrain and everything. Anyway, you must go and take it easy and do what I told you, and hopefully you'll show off temperature. Okay? But once you've had temperature, you should take probably tomorrow about half of a day to rest up. You shouldn't come rushing into the Seder tomorrow. Because once you've had temperature, the system gets all thrown out. It's got to balance back after having had the temperature. Okay? I can see it was really struggling. I can see there's an old expression in Yiddish, is the Augen haben bei ihm geglanzt. His eyes were so that's called in Yiddish, glanzen die Augen. So anyway, I can tell you a few little quips about that, but in Kanamochin we're going here into a very deep Indian of the two Madrigas in Erin Say. And that is, we saw that one is Bepinas Oyer, Shehu Bepinas Hamshocha V'Gilui. Now we could say that that sentence is slightly tantalizing, but what the Rebbe means to say that one Madrega is the union of the Oyer with the Hey idea, the Oyer, meaning that Oyer, generally speaking, if we talk about divine influence, we call it Oyer, then that's a union of Hamshocha V'Gilui. Oyer, Beklal, the whole concept of what we call Oyer means something which is nimshach from a more Oyer, from a source of light. It's already gone forth. Hamshocha V'Gilui, just like we see that light Lamata lights up something for receivers and Makablim. So that Hamshocha usually has a aim to it, which is to be Megala to Makablim something, and that's the idea of Gilui. But you can only be called revealing something to, how do you call it, Makablim, can't you?
Sharpening the lead.
Very okay, fair enough. Okay, all right. Beginnes Shehu beginnes Hamshocha V'Gilui. In other words, it's already two stages. It's gone into derivation from a more, and its union is to light up something, to show something to Makablim. We can even talk about a Oyer which hasn't gone out yet from the Eibishter's Atzmos. It's still somewhat kolel inside him. You understand where these guys are wandering around, I suppose they have their shir now, do they? It starts by quarter tonight. Yeah. There's a union of this Oyer still being kolul bi'atzmusay. שלמעלה מעלה מבחינת האור המאיר אחרי הצמצום בגילוי הקל. We have two general levels in Gilui Elokus. One is what we call Lifnei HaTzimtzum, and the other is the Achrei HaTzimtzum. The emphasis is that even Lifnei HaTzimtzum, as we'll see here, we already have certain levels which are eventually going to be for the sake of the Makablim, and therefore they're considered as Hamshocha V'Gilui. But the whole level of Koidem HaTzimtzum, prior to the union of Tzimtzum, is called Kalul Bi'atzmusei. Even though in that itself there are levels, as we'll soon see, but Kalul Bi'atzmusei means it's still included or still interwoven within the Etzem, and it hasn't really come out yet into the Gilui, which may be certain levels of it are eventually intended to do. And that's what we can say, even Klali, just to give a Moshe Klali al inyan zeh, we can say even Klali that we have a mensch thinks within himself. Yeah, when I say here the word machshava, I don't mean machshava in the ordinary lavush sense, but in a much deeper sense, how a person has got a certain gilui within himself. So he can experience that on two levels. That he's thinking about this inyan purely for his own sake, on his own level, in a way which is only reacting for himself. But that means that that's a gilui of his own self, and it's basically for the purpose of himself, or for the level of himself. And then there's a way that he thinks about that inyan, and it's still within himself, he hasn't given it forth, and it may not actually come forth if there should be some preventative thing. Ultimately, most probably it will, is that's how he's thinking within himself, how this thing is eventually going to be given over to the Zulas, but he hasn't actually gone through all the necessary processes to give it over to the Zulas. He's only considering within himself a way of looking at that in a way that it will eventually be for the sake of the Zulas. And those are two different levels within himself. In other words, he's thinking within himself, either it's purely for the sake of himself, or he's thinking in such a way that it's eventually going to be givable or applicable to the Zula. You know, a lot of potential customers that don't quite realize what they're doing. If you think about it that way, then you can understand this whole concept of kolo biatzmusa. In other words, it's still within the etzem, it hasn't become gilu yet to anybody. But it's like purely for the sake of himself, or it's like a consideration within himself that he's going to have to bring this down and give it over to somebody else, which means that there must be some Yerida already within him, that Machshava Klali is. There's already a Yerida, but Toichoi, which somehow or another makes the Zulas appear on the scene. In the first case, there's nobody appeared on the scene, he's just, as it were, experiencing it within his own self. But it's already something that is experiencing within himself. It's not Mamish Atzmusay, but it's what we call linked with Atzmusay. Kolo B'teich Atzmusay. Amamila said the Rebbe, those are the two inyonim that we're talking about at this particular moment. Yeah, he says that there's a oil which is bam shocha v'gilui. V'imim yeshu gam kem b'chinas kolo biatzmusay. Shalamayla mayla b'chinas ha'meiyah acha hatzimtzum. Oh, because after the tzimtzum, then the earth is what we call meiyah. It's lighting up and coming directly to the makabel. And so in our marshal, the mashpia, before he can give over even that what he's considering for the sake of the Zulas, he's got to really undergo a big limitation within himself and make like a gap between him and the makabel, and then he can start working out practically how it's going to go across. Well, that gap between him and the makabel, which he has to make, because he's too high for the makabel, well, that's called the tzimtzum. That's like a mashal for the tzimtzum. So the Eivish Kaviol also does that, but the tzimtzum is a much more immense thing, Lamaila. That's called the tzimtzum rishon, or the tzimtzum ha'ikli, and from that then goes out a oil which is meiyah. It actually shines to the makabel. So when you say meiyah, you mean you're lighting up to something. That means that the makabel is already being taken into account. He's already become real, and you're giving the light in a way which is already limited for the way that the makabel will be able to be makabel. That's called gilui hakav. The Rebbe says that after the tzimtzum has occurred, and then there comes back this revelation of a limited, as you might call, line of hashpah, which is called the kav. Well, that indicates that we've already limited ourselves in such a, or limited the etzem in such a way that we're now able to be mamish meiyah to the zulas, which means that even though we can say, generally speaking, that the shorosh of the kav is in the Yersh Lifnei, called a tzimtzum, and the Yer in the Amshocha, which is nimshuk by the mashpia to the makabel, really belongs in the Yer the way he experiences it. Really, the kav shorosh is in the inif and the pnimis, how it is lamayla mi'atzimtzum. Yet nonetheless, the Tzimtzum causes in the Kav a Inyan Shel Hakbola, that it's able to come to the Makabel Lefi Inyanov. Well, that means that the Kav, and here's the thing that is dealt with in many turns of what you might call the pancake. It considers the Inyan of the Kav. We see that the Kav is like a combination. It's like almost a paradox. How do you call it? A union of two opposites. That mitzad echad, the Kav comes from the original oyer. It comes from the original yichud of the mashpia with the oyer, but it comes through the union of the tzimtzum in such a way that the tzimtzum, which is the koach hagvuli, the limit affects and places a limitation on something which is basically unlimited. And so that is like a paradox, and that can only be mitzad the yichulus of the Eibishter, or the how do you call it, the omnipotence of Hashem, that He can make two things together. And that's ultimately what the Kav is all about. Therefore, whichever way you come at the Kav, you can call it the koach hagvuli, you can call it the koach habligu. Ultimately, you got to unite it with these two inyanim together. But suffice it to say that there's a zichar of what comes out in the Kav is already the oyer, which is Sha'atu HaMakav, it's already been limited, and it's coming away that it's Meir El HaMakablin. And so there was the Rebbe, that's the oyer which is Shaykh El HaMakablin. And that's that oyer which is B'Pchinas Hamshocha V'Giloi Min Ha'atzmas. And therefore he said it's the oyer HaMeir Achat Tzimtzum B'Giloi HaKav. So that's the whole union of the two powers and the two inyonim in this what we call the Kav. Well, that's the union of the Oyer Ein Sof and the Oyer HaGvul B'Yachad. Mikol Mokim Hariu B'Pchinas Mahus U'Matzias Oyer Al Chaponim. Or it's a Mahus, it's by etzem definition, and it's a B'China V'Matzias of Oyer Al Chaponim. Oyer meaning something which is already lighting up something else, as we explained earlier. The word oyer means a thing which is giving forth light in order to eventually bring a message with it. Therefore it means it's a form of matzias. It's got some entity about it which has got a tachlis to it. V'zehu b'klolos b'chinas oyer ein sof lefnei atzimtzum. He said, Gam mashal amayla b'chinas aliyas harotzen. He said, V'gam b'chinas oyer ha'etzem. שזהו בבחינת הלם האויר, מכל מוקים כל זהו בבחינת המשוכר וגילוי מן העצמות. So every now and then, just to show you that you know whatever you thought you knew, you get shown that you don't really know. Every now and then the Rebbe puts in a sentence which causes the arousal of the putting on of the thinking caps, how to use the old expression. So here we see that we were getting satisfied that we'd all come down to the oyer which is miskali in the Kav, but that's already the oyer mamish for the sake of the makabel. It's gone to the tzimtzum and now it's coming over to the Kav. So the Rebbe said, yeah, fine. That's the lower level. That's the lower level of the oyer which is b'chinas gilui v'amshocha, or amshocha v'gilui. And now he says, so b'klolas. In other words, a Bazel must be referring back to all the aspects of this sentence, not just that last piece. The Bechina Oyer Ein Sof Lefnei Tzimtzum, Gam Mashal Amayla B'Pchinas Aliyas Harotzon. Gam B'Pchinas Oyer Ha'etzem, Shezeu B'Pchinas Helem Oyer. Now that's really a bit of a bomb, because if you're familiar with that mime over there, Kiyum from Koach Hayim, expressions exactly as Meduyach is that, though, even in that tremendously complex mind over there, don't quite occur exactly in the deity in exactly the type of expression. The Oyer HaEtzem. Over there, the Rebbe talks a lot about what he calls the Etzem HaOyer. Putting it the other way around, Oyer HaEtzem. That we have to put on our, we have to think from on. So what we can suggest is like this. That it's Mufur in Siddur in many places, and also mentioned over there in that Rush and in other parts of the Chassidus of the Rebbe Rashab Barichas, that as we pointed out before, in the Oyer Ein Sof Lefnei Hatzimtzum, the different gradations, like states or madrigas. So before we get to the actual Tzimtzum, we also go through certain gradations, but they're also forms of tzimtzumim, but they're not the tzimtzum absolutely, the absolute tzimtzum that's in the tzimtzum harishon. And that's what we call, there's what's called two levels, aliyas harotzain, and what's called hashora b'koyach. In other words, after a certain level of the gilui of the Ein Sof, there's a level which is purely just gilui, the Eivishter's etzem, purely for the sake of gilui etzem. When I say purely for the sake of gilui etzem, that's what it appears, but ultimately it's not really only that. But it's like we saw, beyond any hamshocha to a gilui, to a makabel, even though it's already called hamshocha. And that's what we call aliyas harotzin. That's already after certain levels in these types of giluim. Now, aliyas harotzin, immediately you say rotzin, you're already talking about a koyach proti. The word rotzon means a given type of inyan which we can take from ourselves, a picture of a specific entity, of a power or capacity of the soul, which is called rotzin. That's what's called a koyach proti. Even though it's a koyach klali, like every other koyachas, but it's also the gabi, the klolos of the nevish and the klolos of the Ein Sof, it's a prat. So what happens here is that within the whole gilu of the Ein Sof, koydem tzimtzum, there occurs what's called the aliyas harotzim. The Eibishter begins to reveal that all these giluim have what you might call a aim, and they have a point. In other words, that up to now there's been all these amazing nuances from the etzem, hamshochas v'ha'olas min ha'etzem, which we call oya. All of a sudden it begins to appear that these are all aiming at something. They're all aiming ultimately to reach this amazing thing called the bria. Yeah, there's going to be a bria, and there's only going to be esser spheres, for example, and there's only going to be a whole seder of specificality and limitation, which is eventually going to bring about the Gimel Olam as Bria Tira Vasiya, and eventually it's going to bring about Olam HaZeh, and eventually it's going to bring about the Menj, and eventually it's going to bring about Dira V'Tateinu, and who knows what. That is called the Aliyas Harotzim, where the Eibishter begins to reveal that in all this unbelievable general gilu of himself, which has gone off from the Atzmas, that really he's aiming at a specific matorah, you might call it a specific goal. Well, that appears without actually functioning, but it begins to appear. And that's what we call Aliyas Harotzoin. And that's to take an example by yourself. Oftentimes you think to yourself, oh, I would really, this is a tremendous thing that I'd really like to have or to do, or I'd really like to be like this, or and it could be that it's a long way from activity, and it could be, it may not ever become Maisa. I mean, halavai that it will. If it's a good thing, halavai that it will. Yeah, because it has to undergo a whole series of other developments before it actually becomes Poel Mamish. But that's what we call inside the klolos that we spoke about before, inside the mashpia, how he is, the klolos eitel atzmei. All of a sudden there appears a certain, what you might call will or aim, to aim in a certain direction and to achieve certain inyanim. And that's called aliyas harotzoin. And it doesn't mean anything b'poel yet. It doesn't even oblige him yet to anything. He hasn't actually committed himself. But the aim and what you might call the matorah have appeared within the klolos of his mind. He sort of put forth a general idea of what he would really want, what he would really, what you might call, like to be or to achieve or to do in this world. Oh, that's called aliyas harot. So that even happens before the tzimtzum, that the Eibishter gradiates the oil in such a way that there's a certain specificality occurs there without it actually limiting the Ein Sof of the earth. That's clear that the specificality begins to appear on the background of an unlimited oil, which is still unlimited, and that's the beginning of the union of the limitation and the Ein Sof, which ultimately become the cow, and that's called Aliyas Harotzon. And therefore it's called the going up of the Rotzon, which is the occurring of the Rotzon, not Gilui Harotzen, because once we talk about Gilui Harotzen, then we've already become committed to a specific line of action, or what you might call, which is going to cause limitation mamish, and that's already the count, or even after the count. So Rebbe says the Rebbe, we've got our Inyan Shelfnei HaTzimtzum, which is even beyond this whole Inyan of Aliyas Harotzen. V'gam, he said, even higher than that, B'chinas Oyer Ha'etzem, Shezo B'chinas Helem Ha'oyer. Now this expression, Oyer Ha'etzem, is an unusual one, because the Rebbe usually doesn't use it that way. Usually he says Etzem Ha'oyer, and here he says Oyer Ha'etzem. So that's obviously meant for readers to, break their heads a little bit to understand. So when he uses over there in that Maimah Kimcha Makar, when he uses the expression Etzem Ha'oyer, then he means Oyer, which is not yet for the sake of Gilu, it's not yet really being Meir anything, but on the other hand, it's not the Etzem, it's already Ha'ora. Now what's its Inyan? Its Inyan is purely to be Megala the Etzem. But it's the way a Ha'ora is Megala, not the Etzem itself being Begilu, but a Ha'ora being Megala the Etzem. And one of the dugmas, it's only a dugma, because it's got limitations, is the oil which goes off from the shemesh. But in that itself, in that gufa, what the Alter Rebbe brings in Shara Yichud, in Perek Gimel, the famous Moshe of the Ur HaKol inside the shemesh, not the Ur which is out in the Halal, but the Ur which is Mamish Kolul Terech HaShemesh. That's already our oil which has gone off from the shemesh, but it's inside, as it were. It's more the shemesh than it is the idea of oil, but it's still oil. So the Eibishter Kaviyach also, the Eibishter gives off a light at the beginning. Its whole Inyan is only to reveal Him. It's not to, in any way, it's not ready for Makablim yet. It's too high for Makablim, because they can't possibly be Makabel at that level. And therefore you have to undergo this other gradation that we called Aliyas Harotzen, something specific. It's got to So even to the point that you're not, what do you need to Megala that over? If it's only Gilui Haetzem, it's not really for the Makablim. Why did he have to be Megala that over Melchatchila? And that question is in effect asked in Tzedef, and the answer is that ultimately he's going to give you that as well, even though it's not really meant for Makablim, but ultimately the Makablim are going to get that also. But for our point of view, that's not what we're going into at the moment. So we have to suggest that when the Rebbe says the expression Oyer Ha'etzem, he means that Madrega, and therefore he calls it more correctly what it really is. It's the Oyer of the Etzem. It's a Gilui which is purely to be Megala the Etzem. It's not to be Megala anything for Makablim yet. And in order to get to Makablim, you've got to undergo this whole gradation, which is called Aliyas Harotzen, which are forms of Tzimtzumim in the Oyer. He said, the Rebbe, you've got the Inyan of Oyer Shel Hamayla Mibchinas Aliyas Harotzen. V'gam, he says, so there's a Oyer which is beyond Aliyas Harotzen. V'gam, and then there's a Bechina of Oyer Ha'etzem. In other words, that this Oyer Ha'etzem is even higher than the Oyer which is higher than the Aliyas Harotzen. So B'chinas Helem Ha'oyer. He said, this is Oyer, but it's the Inyan of Helem Ha'oyer. In other words, it's a Oyer, but its whole Inyan is Helem. And that's a Pele Tikizach. It's a Oyer, but it's Helem. And that's almost like two completely contrasting ideas. That everything is Oyer, it must be to be Megala something. So he said, no, this is the Inyan from Helem Ha'oyer. It's Oyer, but its Inyan is Helem. So I mean, why did he ever do what do you need a Oyer which is Helem? I mean, that's another question. But the question is that the point of our point is that there is such a Oyer that is purely the Inyan of the Etzem, but it's a Oyer. Or will it be the normal concept of Oyer? It's Helem Oyer. It's like the Helem in Oyer Gufa. Now, said the Rebbe, Mikol Mokim, Kolze, all these levels and all these madrigas that we just mentioned, Hu B'chinas Hamshocha V'Gilui Min Ha'atzman. He said, all that is all Hamshocha V'Gilui. It's not the Atzmas, it's not even things which are really sharp to the Atzmas, they're Giluim, and a Gilu is a Ha'ora Bilvad, and therefore a Ha'ora is one on, it's absolutely not B'chlal sharp to the Etzem. So all these inyanim, I feel this etzem or oil, or what we call oyer ha'etzem, But that's Hilem Ha'oyer, but that's all Begilu in Olim van Amshocha Begilu. That's all come out of the Eibishter in a form of Ahora Bilvad, and so be Nimsha. And that's what the Arizal calls, what he refers to as the term Netzl Kol Netzolium V'chulim, or your Poshut Amamal Kol HaMatzir. So the emphasis is when the Arizal uses that expression, he's already talking about a slightly lower level than the Etzemoyer. Consider that the Etzemoyer is even L'mayla Mizeh, or what he calls here the Ha'etzer, which, as I said, is a slightly tricky expression. I have to say that Rabbi uses it here for the point of showing that it's ultimately speaking, even though it's Etzemoyer, it's Oyer. In other words, Tzika terminology is Oyer. It's just that it's a Oyer of the Etzer. It's only a Gilu, it's not a Ini van Atzim. So therefore, he used the expression of Oyer Ha'etzer, not Etzemoyer. Mikol Mokim. Oh, this is only the Ini van Amshocha, but Gilu Menat. Aval Yesh Oid Madrege Boyer Ein Say. Who are Kolo Biatzmusei Mamish. Now, all these in Yonah we just called Kolo Biatzmusei, like we saw before the Alama Tzimtzum. Anything is still Kolo B'toichoi. It's all inside himself. But he said it's Giluim in Yonah which have gone out in a form of revelation. They're a form of Oyer, but they're all still within the Etzem. They're prior to the Tzimtzum, but therefore they're called within the Etzem. But he said there's another level of Oyer which is Mamish in his Etzem Mamish. Ba'ainu rak masha b'yichol lo hoyer. She'ein zeh b'kinas mahusa matzias klal uklal. Gam loi b'kinas ha'oyer shelifnei ha'tzimtzum. Not even in the oyer shelifnei ha'tzimtzum is this ha'inyan von oyer. Now, here we meet up with the famous concept of yechoilas. And yechoilas means capability. If the word yechoilas from the word yochel, what yochel means possibility. So when we say yechoilas l'mayla, then we mean that the Eibishter could give off light. He can give off light. That part of his omnipotence is that he can give off light. When we say, or put it, one aspect of his omnipotence is that he can give off, he can give off light. But he didn't actually give it off, because if he's already given it off, then it's already Oyer Ha'etzem. It's not. We're talking about the capacity that he could give forth light. Yeah, therefore that's called Atzmusei more than it's called Kolab Atzmusei. And the lesson from that is that Yechoilis means what you can do, not necessarily what you're doing. And therefore, we always have to ask the question, what is your Yechoilis? Not what are you doing? What is your Yechoilis? We always have to ask, what could you do? And that's the inyan of a Rebbe like Gabi Al-Chassid. Al-Chassid, he's able to me, Mikala, what he can do, and what he can do, Gufa, a lot. A Rebbe reveals to him what he could really do. And that's almost unlimited. If you, even in a human being, if you say what you could do, what is your capacity? You could maybe do that. Mitzad the perfection of your etzem, there's almost no limit to it. A mensch can do anything. I don't know if he can fly with his own wings to Mars or something. But within the realm of what humans can achieve, he can do anything. He can do almost anything. The reason he doesn't, because all sorts of side issues get in the way of a mitzad the actual etzem. Almost anything is possible. So just imagine by the Eibishter, the Eibishter's Yechoilis is kol Yechoil. There's absolutely nothing that could be given or done or achieved or v'chule v'chule. Yeah, but what you say that the Eibishter could do a certain thing, then you're already going down from the shleimus of the atzmus, and you're talking about a certain thing that he could do, Kavioho. Even though you're talking still in the etzem, and you haven't separated from the etzem, but you've already gone down from the perfection of the etzem, and you've gone into a certain level what the etzem could do. But that's what he called Oyer. That's what he called Oyer, even though it's not Oyer. And with that, the Rebbe's Mafarish over there, if I'm not mistaken, the Rebbe's Mafarish over there, that's what is written in the Zohar, that the Zohar Kodesh says in Bereshis taught that. The Zohar Kodesh says that there's a level of Nehoirin, of light, The lavinu nehoirin. It's light, but it's not light. They're lights, they're not lights, but they're lights. So can't have your cake and eat it too. It says they're nehoirin or lavinu nehoirin. Yeah, they're not lights. So I mean, if they're not lights, don't mention it there. So the Rebbe says, oh, that's the union of Yechoilas. It's lavinu nehoirin. It's not light because it didn't go off yet. It's not mayim in our atzmas. So why do we call it nehoirin? Because it's already, if you say the Eibusha could do that, then you've gone down from the absolute withdrawn perfection of his atzmas, and you've come into what he could do. What he could do is already a certain way of describing him almost. It's like a certain level. And remember, what he could produce, well, that's already not the actual absolute withdrawnness of the atzmas, and here on the other hand, it's not separate from the atzmas. So that's the second level. Those are the level of Yechoilas. This is a famous concept in very famous Musag, the Musag of Yechoilas. He said, Rach Masha Yechoil Teilahoyer. It's not a gilui of anything. It's not a oyer which has come out in the form of a entity called light. It's not anything to do even like the oyer shelifnei atzimtzum, which is a tremendously high level in oyer. This is within the atzma. He told me what he could do. It's not a thing on its own right, from the Atzma. Ki, look at that. Ki bi'atzmus mamish eno shayach loim achas v'sholem oi dovo. Gam loim b'finas koyach ha'oyer. So here your mind just bubbles out. So here the Rebbe said, if you're talking about atzmas, mamish, then you can't chas v'sholem talk about any other inyan. You can't say there's any other entity apart from him. Once you come up into his atzma, if you say Yechoilas, you're only talking about what he could do, but you're not talking about he may have actually done it yet. There's nothing actually occurred. Therefore, you can't say that it's any entity, because immediately you say it's an entity, then it's apart from the atzma. It's not the atzma. People say, what are we actually? He said it's va'ena b'chinas dora mina atzmas, because in atzmas that's not shayah. Chas v'sholem gam loim b'chinas koyach ha'oyer. So the Rebbe says you can't say that the Yechoilas is what we call koyach ha'oyer. Now here he's using the word koyach in the sense of, you say a thing about koyach, you mean potential. So you can't say that the Yechoilas to give forth light is the potentiality of light in the Eibusha. You can't do that, because immediately you say potentiality, then that means he's already done it, because by the Eibusha there's no potential and no poil. But the difference between potential and poil doesn't exist. If what you say koyach of the oil, the potential of the light, then you're already talking about light. And therefore, if you're not, when you say Yechoilas, you're not talking about a potential either, a real potential to produce light. You're just talking about an ability that he could produce light. But not that he's actually a mokir for light. Not that he's like this. Immediately you say koyach, you're talking about a relationship between koyach and the dover hanimshuk mimena. Therefore, not even on that level do we mean it. No, we mean purely the union of Yechoilas. So he said, Shal zeh nema hu u'shmoi echad. He said not that we say hu u'shmoi, that the Eibusha and his name are one. The hu u'shmoi, the hu shmoi u'shmoi hu, that he's his name and his name is him. V'shikosuv hashlo. But the Shloah Kodesh is brought down in the Shloah. In the Sefer Shloah. Yeah, the Shloah Kodesh writes over there that there's a level in Shmoi where the Eibusha and his name are mamish one thing. So everybody breaks their head. It's a name, it's not him. I mean, a name is already a gilu, it's like a ha'ora or something. What do you mean by he and his name is one? What do you mean? That it's in Yechoilas. In Yechoilas, that's he in his atzmas, and the shmoi are really he in his atzmas. There's no shmoi yet, but since you've already said Yechoilas, you've already somehow or another mentioned shmoi, but you haven't gone out from the the actual pshitas of the atzmas. Therefore, the Shloah writes over there a very fascinating Indian. He said, therefore, the word who means he in Russian Kodesh, means the Atzmas, is a Rosh Tevas, who ushmoi echad. The word who is who ushmoi echad. That is what the Shloah. Which means that there's a Indian, when you say who and you mean him, you mean, well, who, what else can you say? I mean, who means he, it means the Eibster. You're also saying who ushmoi echad. But there's a level where in who is shmoi and who are the same Inyan. And those are the Indians for Ato Kodesh for Shimcha Kodesh. Or we're going to say here, Kodesh Ato V'noi Rosh Melech. We'll see as we go along how that comes more into the picture, and then we'll as I see. You guys wanted to learn a bit of some of those. So you got it. That's it.